Hello, everyone. Welcome to the PaperCircuit Podcast, or as we call it, PC Squared. I'm your host, Gautam Godse, and together we explore new ideas and meet interesting people from all over the world. Today, my guest is my friend and my finance guru, Anil Lamba from Pune. You probably have heard of him if you live in India. He's a best selling author on books on finance. His amazing books are available everywhere and used in most business finance curriculums. Hi, Anil. Welcome to Paper Circuit. It's great to see you again. How are you?
Very good, Gautam. Thank you for inviting me. Pleasure to be here.
My pleasure, my honor as well. Just to give you a background for my audience, Anil and I we go way back. When I was doing my first startup back in India in 1994 or so, I realized very soon after launching the startup that we were earning some money, but I didn't know how to manage the money, and I had not been taught that in my engineering curriculum or even my high school curriculum, and that's something that I think should be fixed, and we'll talk about that later. But then, luckily for me, I found this ad in the newspaper promising me to learn finance in 10 weeks. And I signed up for it. And that was Anil Lamba's finance class, 101, Finance 101. And it had helped me tremendously. It has helped me tremendously since then. And he's been instrumental in helping me change my ways of thinking about finance, about startups, and about companies in general. So, Anil, how did you start this journey? Because I think when you finished graduating out of college, you were not intending to teach. I think you were looking for a job.
No, I was never looking for a job, but teaching was furthest away from my mind. I couldn't ever dream I'll ever be teaching one day. I passed out as a chartered accountant.
Mm-hmm.
And I think kind of foolishly decided to set up practice day one. So I've never ever worked for anyone and didn't want to. Uh, but when you set up a new practice, you are supposedly a practicing CA with hardly any clients. And incidentally, it so happens that if you're a fresh chartered accountant, these management colleges tend to invite you to teach MBA finance. So I was invited, and that's the first time the thought ever came. And the first reaction was, no, I haven't studied this subject to teach. But then, when you coolly think about it, you realize as a practicing professional, you don't get all kinds of clients every day. So your knowledge would tend to get rusty. And the best way to keep in touch with your subject is to teach. So applying that logic, I agreed to do so. But then I stumbled onto something which became a passion. I enjoyed the teaching stint so much that I took on numerous assignments. As a practicing CA and on your own, you're sitting in your office, you look at your watch, or there's time for a lecture, go give a talk and come back and continue working. So teaching was a hobby, work was practice. But then as practice grew, teaching became a pain in the sense that I'm sitting and talking to a client, I'm looking at my watch, I got a lecture. And like it or not, the lecture takes priority because there are 50, 70, 80 people waiting for you. You can't just decide not to go.
Right.
So then I started kind of tapering it off. But then fortunately, by then corporations started inviting me. And that was even more fun because those guys were not attending a course to pass an exam. So they used to apply. For them, it's a matter of life and
How
death.
did
So
how
for
did they
me, it was discovery.
how did they find you? How did corporations first approach you? Did they see your lecture, or did somebody
I
from
don't
your
know. Probably word spreads. I remember there's a very, very prestigious institution in Pune called Tata Management Training Center. It's one of the premier
Right.
Tata Group's training. And that was always a place where, when I started teaching, I was hoping one day I should be going there. Now, one day it so happened that I think the person who was supposed to take a finance course for that organization fell ill the night before. So they were desperately looking for someone to come and fill the gap. So they called up these directors of 2, 3 management colleges where I used to teach. And each of them kind of recommended my name. So then they very apologetically called me at night, having got my number from them. We are so sorry. I said, please don't apologize. I've been waiting for an opportunity to come there. And since
Good.
then, for the next 25 years, Every finance program in that institute was done by me. So
Fantastic.
one thing leads to another, and that's how it goes on.
Yeah. So did you, when you were, setting out to teach, how did you approach it? Like, did you approach it as a traditional, say, professor approaching a curriculum, or did you
Gautam,
approach it more from a point of view of what is my audience, what is my student looking for?
you know, you may not believe it. I've never ever prepared for a talk. I land up and then I think after the session starts. And I took that to ridiculous. I mean, in a college, it's okay. But when I started training in these prestigious places also, somehow I got a genetic flaw. I can't think about it before. I can't plan. So my approach was I think it was a very maverick kind of a style. I don't know why the feedback used to be good and therefore it kind of became accepted everywhere. But initially, I used to give them nightmares. I used to land up there and tell me, who am I teaching today? And those guys were managing directors and business leaders from top companies.
Wow.
Definitely at the end of each program, the people used to be so happy that I could get away with this kind of, thing. So
But that's what where the passion and the mastery shows, right? So you can come in and off the cuff, look at the audience and tune your talk onto that. That's called, mastery and passion for what you teach.
maybe.
So then what was the reaction in the overall community? How did you kind of develop it? Did it just grow organically? Did you put some
Organic.
thought behind it?
No thought. But funnily, what happens when you study and pass out, like when I became a CA, I thought I have learned the subject now. The world knows it all along. So I'm the Johnny come lately kind of a thing. And then I was in my 20s, mind you. I started organizing these open workshops also. And some top industrialists would attend. I remember the first industrialist, I can't name that person here, but very renowned person. And he told me in one of the breaks that, Anil, I wish I knew all this 20 years back. My life would have been different. So I thought that's
Precisely.
impossible. He's such a successful industrialist. Impossible that he doesn't know. And if he says so, either he's being modest or this is an aberration. But then the next program, somebody else said, the next time somebody else said, the next time. And then I discovered that, how little the world understands this subject. And this subject is so critical that it is responsible for, it was the single biggest cause of business failures the world over. So college teaching led to corporate teaching, then the word spread, then in addition to Pune, started getting invitations from across the country, and gradually the country started adding. Today we train in every continent in the world except Australia.
So that's a very important point, right? All these great successful people are coming to you and saying that I wish I knew this. So why is that state? Why are we in that state? And not only in India, but all over the world.
This subject, Gautam, is such that the people who badly need it don't even realize they need it. There's a breed of people who call themselves non-finance persons. According to me, this is an oxymoron. There is no creature called non-finance person. Everybody is a finance person. Now, two types of organizations exist. One who hasn't realized how important the subject is.
Right.
Because they have it, and soon they'll suffer the consequences and they learn the hard way. But the second type of organization, which has realized along the way that I need to strengthen my, financial quotient, that this is a very important subject. Tell me, what department will they strengthen? If they realize finance management is important, they will try and see that the finance department is, manned by the most qualified people.
Right.
But the funny part is, very little finance management happens in finance department. This is one unique subject where most of it is happening outside the finance department. In fact, we wrongly call the finance department as finance. You should be calling it the accounts department. Right. Most of the people are there busy recording, and that's a postmortem. Which means by the time the finance professionals come into the picture, the good or the damage is already done. Because everybody within an organization is a finance person, because every person's actions have a financial implication. So unless the so-called non-finance people take financially intelligent decisions, how will the organizational finance management be good? And the account department later on does a postmortem and say, oh, we made a loss of But by then it was already
Too
over.
late.
Those
Yeah,
guys,
it's too late.
even if they are the most qualified, they can do nothing about it because they can't undo what has already been done.
Hmm. That's a very great insight, because I've being in product management, over the last 20 years, I have learned that same insight of product is not just one team's responsibility. It is an end-to-end experience. So when you are designing a product, you need to get every department into the room. Okay, marketing, sales, finance. How are we going to price it? How are you going to market it? What does the post-sale experience look like? Because selling is not just the end of it. Selling is the start of a journey for a customer, right? When a customer buys a product, that's the beginning. For us, most people, businesses, at least in my experience, think selling is okay, we've sold it, we're done, we are making money. But no, the customer experience starts. Then the customer will either like it, not like it, and then speak about it to their friends, either badly or nicely, and then that leads to the success of the product. So similar to that, I think finance is that aspect from your angle is exactly accurate. How you need to think about from an end-to-end top-down approach, not like post-mortem approach.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So what do you think is the current level of, say, financial literacy in most Indian businesses today?
Pathetic. Not
Hmm.
only India. I'm not going to single out India.
Right, right. Yeah,
World over.
world. Yeah, world over.
I train in Europe, when I train in US, when I train in the Middle East, the Far East, Russia, Africa, I find ignorance is uniform.
Hmm.
Having done the program, the appreciation of how important it is uniform. The feedback that I get is consistent throughout. That means everybody's needs are the same. This is one subject that cuts across industries. It cuts across geographies. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter where you are, doesn't matter what you're doing. You need to understand this subject.
And that's a great insight, because as you said, finance is not restricted to the currency, right? The finance is, you can is related to numbers, so it translates to any country. So that's an important point. I think if you could talk a little more about that, that'll help.
No, because the logic remains the same.
Yeah.
We are talking about financial intelligence.
Mhm.
Currency is just the way in which it is expressed. So it doesn't matter what you're doing. I mean, everywhere you do, if you make something for 100, you got to sell it for 120. This
Right.
truth applies everywhere. Doesn't matter where you are.
Yeah, I think that's what was insightful to me when I started reading your books, because in your books you have no currency symbols, you only have numbers.
I don't do
And
that. I don't even put commas because different countries express
right.
it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that helps to in terms of literacy. Anybody can pick up the book and read it and apply to their own nation or their own business laws, etc. So in
True.
terms of how you look forward to uh, creating financial literacy and awareness, what has been the reason? I've been following your progress in the last few years. So what is it that you feel is the tide turning? Are people becoming, are businesses becoming more self-aware?
They are, because you see, this subject that I teach, you don't need to sell. If I have a program, I don't need to
Hmm.
sell it to you. You are, chances are, a pre-sold customer. Or if you're not yet sold on the idea you need to understand finance, then no amount of selling can convince you. But fortunately, there's such a large number of people who are already hurting, who are
Hmm.
already suffering the consequences of not understanding, that my client is the one who has already felt the need.
Hmm.
So awareness is there about how important the subject is, what is the price they are paying for not understanding. And therefore, according to me, if I look at it as a business, the market for this is huge.
Yes.
But having said that, what about the people who can't afford to pay for it?
Hmm.
They need it as badly.
Hmm.
Their amounts involved may be less, but for them, the implication of those amounts is huge if you're a poor person. So we have the social project, Gautam.
Hmm.
I mean, I started with a guilt complex that we are like mercenaries. You know, if you call me, you pay me, I'll teach you. But what if you can't afford to pay? Your need is as much. So initially, the thought came, okay, why don't we train for every 10 programs we do commercially? Let's do one free one. Then you realize how many people will you be able to touch, you
Reach.
know?
Hmm.
Yeah. So, so to cut a long story short, this, as I kept thinking about it, it became a very, very ambitious project, and which culminated in this program of ours, which we call as Financial Literacy for All.
Hmm.
Now, this is a social movement where our target audience is 1 billion Indians. We want to
Wow.
train 1 billion Indians free of cost. So a lot of work is going on over there. It's a volunteer-driven activity. We aim to mobilize 1 million volunteers
Hmm.
to train 1 billion Indians.
And what do those volunteers, million volunteers, need to do? What do they need to learn themselves?
See, what we've done is we've divided a target audience into 6 groups,
Hmm.
which includes the smallest business people, the trader, the small shopkeepers, whose need is the same as any large organization, but they can't dream of ever paying money and attending a workshop or something like that. So one is those guys. Within the corporation, we want to train the lowest rung employees whom the employer never spends money on training. We want to train housewives of low income households who are kind of the de facto finance managers of the house, but they don't understand. As they're struggling to make ends meet. And because they don't understand, they have to work probably even harder.
Right.
So next category is NGOs
Hmm.
who are trying to do good. And if they understand finance management, they'll probably be able to do good to more people with the same resources. Another category is students.
Yes.
We said, let's teach them young, right into school levels. And the last category, for want of a better description, we call them the generally underprivileged category.
Hmm. Hmm.
Slum dwellers, the vegetable vendors,
Hmm.
and so on. Now, what we are doing is we are creating content for all these 6 categories, what to teach them.
Hmm.
That content will be put up on our website for anyone to access. So we are, on the other hand, mobilizing volunteers. Now, and I realize getting volunteers is the easiest. On a daily basis, I get requests from people, can I become a volunteer? So that kind of a thing, even though we've not actively started wooing them yet.
Hmm.
So when somebody says, I want to be a volunteer, we will just check which category they would like to reach out to. Because we don't expect people to leave their work and, do this. So a person working within a corporation might say, once in a while, I'll talk to my workers on the shop floor.
Hmm.
Or a mother who goes to school anyhow to drop the kids or something. She says, I can go to a school and talk to them. Some social-minded people may offer to go to slums. Depending on which category you'd like to address, we will give you access to that content absolutely free of cost. You read it, you go through it, you download, you make copies, whatever you wish. And we expect the volunteer to do 2 things. We expect the volunteer to teach somebody from the target audience, and of course, free. And number 2, we hope the volunteer to mobilize more people to volunteer. So an exponential impact will happen. So this is the framework in which we're working.
No, that's a fantastic program. I'm hoping that all my audience will look into that. We'll publish the website address as well on the video. And I think this is something that I think, as you said, needs to be mobilized from the grassroots level. Everybody should understand, especially the underprivileged, because they have a very small pool of money to play with, and they have to optimize every rupee, every dollar, every 1 unit of currency. So they are the ones who need it most, I would say.
Very true. Very true.
So how long do you keep expecting to doing this? You've been doing this for a long, long time. Do you ever feel that you're burnt out? Do you ever feel, oh, this is one seminar too many?
I feel so blessed. I don't feel I worked a day in my life. This is my hobby turned passion turned activity. So you don't retire from having fun.
Correct.
So I don't feel I've overworked in my life. In fact, my CA practice I left behind when this training thing picked up, and I saw massive potential in it. So, but I must tell you about another very interesting thing we are doing. Having understood how important the subject is, I've always felt if somebody comes and attends a training workshop with us, what we have done at the end of the workshop is we have now created a financially intelligent individual. That doesn't mean the organization which this person represents has also become financially intelligent. And we feel what is required are financially intelligent organizations. We call it an FIO. Now, this is kind of I think the first of its kind in the world, like an ISO certificate. Like an ISO. We'll certify companies to be financially intelligent. And this is getting so much of interest. Any business owner or any managing director or a CEO that I mentioned this to, he says, Anil, can we start tomorrow itself? Now, what happens? How do we certify a company to be financially intelligent? We feel literacy is one part. But literacy without relevant and timely information is no use. So if an organization wants to be certified as a financially intelligent organization, two things will happen. Number one, training has to be imparted to everybody, not selectively.
Right.
You cannot call me and say, Anil, I want to train these 500 people or these 1,000 or 2,000 people. If your organization has got 10,000 people, I'm going to train 10,000 people. I'll take a call who to train to what extent. You know, pick up the creamy layer and say, we'll give them a 5-day input. Somebody else will give a 2-day input. Certain other 3,000 of your absolutely shop floor workers, we will give them a 1-hour sensitization talk.
Right.
Some people will be taught face-to-face. Some will be taught, I've got a series of videos. We got a series of e-learning programs. We got books. Some people will be trained through videos and different mediums, but we'll reach out to everyone. But having trained, like I said, it's no use unless you bring out the right information at the right time. So we'll go into your systems. We'll audit your system. We'll audit your accounting system. We'll audit your reporting system. We'll identify gaps in that. We will suggest tweaking of accounting system. We will design customized MIS reports that you should be generating if you're not already doing so.
That's a sensitive subject though, right? Do most organizations voluntarily accept that, okay, they want to be audited by a third party? And
Gautam, I have a problem. I'm running out of bandwidth. Such a spontaneous response. I have to keep telling them, hang on, I'm going to come to you later. So the audit is not it's in their own interest.
Right.
We'll tell you what reports you should be generating. We'll tell you with what frequency those reports should come out. We'll tell you who in your hierarchy should be recipient of which report. When the right information comes out at the right time, reaches the right person, and by the time it reaches that person, he's been trained to read, understand, interpret, and take actions based on that. Once this has happened, we will then certify this organization to be a financially intelligent organization. My hope and dream is that in the coming years, a banker won't give you a loan if you're not an FIO. A shareholder will not buy your share if you're not an FIO. Because if you're not FIO, meaning if you're not financially intelligent, it's a matter of time before the organization will get into trouble. And if the organization gets into trouble, the owner's not the only one who suffers. Employees lose jobs, bankers lose money, shareholders lose money, vendors. It's in the mutual interest of everybody that the organization is an FIO.
So that's a great concept. Yeah, that's a great concept. I think I think the certification and the requirement from all levels of government as well as organizations will help people understand that. So can you share with us some organizations that have become FIO?
They're in the process. This is a relatively new thing. Right now, currently I'm doing for a Dutch company based in Pune. So all the training is going on. We are doing for an automobile parts, large organization based in Delhi. Several more places, the talks are going on, but this requires a lot of involvement of mine. Like I said, I have bandwidth constraints. I need to figure out how to expand this activity more.
So looking at all your past experience and students and organizations you've taught, give me some examples of the very satisfying examples of people who have actually taken your advice and your training to heart, have changed themselves and the organization. How has that motivated you as well?
It's on a daily basis I get this motivation. It keeps me charged up all the while. Every case, in fact, who attends, that has made a difference in that person's life. And no credit goes to me. The subject is such. If they stayed away from this subject, they were paying a price. Number one, once they come to us, they realize how important it is. They understand how to handle it. They make sure that thereafter they don't commit the mistake they were making in the past, and their lives become better. There are businesses that have turned around. There are businesses which are doing well, but they do many times better than what they were doing before. So everywhere there's a positive difference. It's just a matter of degrees.
Well, you have one sitting right across you who has benefited from that in the last 30 years of my career. So I can vouch for it personally.
Say that. It's nice of you.
Yeah. So in financial education, there's people only think, okay, there's only so much you can teach and do. So how do you innovate? What is your process of innovation? How do you come up with, like, for instance, the FIO idea? Do you have a team of people? Do you sit and brainstorm? Do you do focus groups? What is your methodology?
No such thing. It all comes while you're interacting with people. All the
Hmm.
ideas come when you're talking to your target audience. At one time, I think at our peak, we were never ever a large organized in terms of people. But at our peak, when we were doing multiple things, we were about almost 100 people.
Wow.
I have made myself so lean over the years that today we are half a dozen. Everything is outsourced. So there is
Fantastic.
no focus group, there's no nothing. Long back, we took a decision that there'll have to be only a single trainer, and we
Hmm.
need to build an ecosystem around this trainer. Before that, when I saw the scope and the potential, I had 100 trainers with me.
Oh, wow.
And I realized what a mistake that was,
Hmm.
because no two trainers are alike. You send a bunch of trainers in different directions, each one gets a different feedback. I said, then you can't build a brand. We need
Right.
consistency. You either be consistently good or be consistently bad, but you've got to be consistent. So
Right.
then we took a hard decision that, trainer will have to be one, so that whatever we teach everywhere is the same matter. So the books are written by me, the videos, I'm not talking about it from an egoistic point of view. I was the only resource available and free of cost to myself.
Right.
So the videos were mine, the books were mine, the training was mine. So we kind of, even though I don't understand technology, I always envy you. You are the technology guru. I don't understand technology at all. But despite that, we kind of developed these products, e-learning products, video products. Now, all that, Gautam, turned out to be such a blessing when this pandemic hit.
Hmm. Right. Right.
We were geared, we hit the ground running, and now almost everything we do has gone online. And I'm kicking myself, why didn't we do this earlier?
I think that was
So,
the big reveal of COVID. People are
yeah,
kicking themselves,
yeah.
including large organizations. Why did we insist on getting people at a very expensive rate into sitting in an office for like 8 hours a day when they're doing more jobs in their own house without any cost to us, because they don't, we don't pay lease rent on their house, and we are getting double the productivity. So why we'll just pay for their bandwidth and make
I think
sure they
some
continue working.
cases, this is amenable completely, like mine. So makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so that's again a consistent insight that I've had with other of my guests, that COVID has been a really good event that made them rethink the way they do their operations, their business, and in fact their life as well.
True, 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 true.
So finally, I think one of the ways that I end my podcast is I ask three questions to the guests, the same questions, and these are pretty simple questions if you look at the structure of it, but the answers are always interesting. So my first question to you is, what do you wish you really understood?
Technology.
Hmm. And then why is that? What will that help you to do?
Because it could leverage my reach no end.
Hmm.
If I was a little more savvy in technology, if I had in one part of my brain a Gautam Godse hidden over there, and whatever I am doing could have been far bigger, far more. The reach would have been more, the speed would have been greater,
Right.
lots of things.
No, but I think one of the things I must commend you, you were always on the cutting edge. Even when I had my first startup, my BBS, you were one of the first subscribers there. You were using, online email, all of that stuff very early. So I think you should,
It to me like you. So I need to
yeah.
take it forward.
Yeah. My second question: what is the strangest question that anyone has asked you?
Hmm. I wish you had warned me about these questions earlier so I could have
That's
thought.
that's the idea. I don't want to warn people because I want to see what they come up with.
Uh, can't think of it, yeah, Gautam. Strangest question.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be in your, teaching. Can be in real life.
Yeah. Let's say when you ask me when would you think you'll retire, you'll burn out, I find it very strange. What I find strange, Gautam, is when people talk about work-life balance. These things have never made
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah,
Because if your work is fun, why would you want a work-life balance?
exactly.
People get so if somebody asks me that question, I find it odd. Why? And when you say when will you retire? Why? I mean, you're having so much fun. Why should you retire from that? People get, Monday morning blues. I've always got Saturday evening blues.
Yes.
Oh hell, tomorrow's a holiday. What? So I really don't. I don't mind if I have to work 24 hours, but it doesn't feel like work at all. So
Now, that's a common theme with my guests as well. They all enjoy their work and they don't think it's work, it's fun. So the whole idea of burning out doesn't, occur to them. So I think I can, verify that myself. For me, work has always been fun. And I believe that if it is no longer fun, then I need to change my work,
exactly, you're in the
right?
wrong place, doing the wrong thing.
Exactly.
True.
And a lot of my guests, they have been like, working at a job for 2 decades and they realized, oh, this is not, I'm not enjoying this anymore. And now they've switched to something which they do daily, and as you said, they get Saturday evening blues. They don't want a holiday. Okay, last question. What gives you confidence?
Ah, knowledge. I think the biggest confidence giver is when you know your stuff, and you know your stuff. That's about it, without being boastful. But I think anyone who's lacks confidence is because you lack the substance.
How true, how true. I completely, can identify with that. When I was a kid, I used to keep writing on my notebooks, knowledge is power. And that pretty much is true. So thank you. With that, I would like to thank Anil for spending some time with me and exploring the fascinating world of financial literacy. I'll put links to all his books in the show notes. You can check out his various books on his website, lamconschools.com. And I'll put again those links again in the show notes. And I wish you the best, continued success, and many more such financial innovations to come out of LAMCON and your brain. So thank you, Anil. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you, Gautam. It was a pleasure.